Everybody is into video games these days. It is a huge piece of our culture, but with culture and influence comes a past history that everybody has a different experience on. And really, I want to talk about my console experiences. There's so many stories to so many people about the reason they loved a certain game and the reason they play. And really what I wanted to do was talk more about the systems and what my history was with them. And the stories were interesting enough to me that I wanted to share them with you guys. And I'm curious why you loved a certain console or what your first entry was into each of these systems. So, dude, let's get into it. So I'm doing this video off the cuff, sitting in the game room and really just looking around at the consoles that I've decided to put in front of me and why I've done that. My first one up obviously is the NES, and the Nintendo Entertainment System was an important one to me, and the first time that I had ever played it was when I went over to my friend's house and he had Mega Man 2 and a Nintendo. I had never played anything like this before. My dad had a Channel F and a old like Atari demo stick from Sears, which was like my first entry into playing some of those like 1-bit, 2-bit graphics. The Nintendo, I remember Mega Man just being such a unique title. One of the following years during Christmas, we ended up getting a Nintendo, which my dad absolutely loved. He was a huge fan of sci-fi titles. Some of my first entries was Galaxy 5000, Isolated Warrior, Abadox, The Deadly Inner War, and those games, because he was such a sci-fi fan, was kind of my intro into Nintendo. My dad wasn't the adventure guy. He didn't have Zelda. We didn't, have Super Mario Bros. 3 when that came out. We had all of these weird sci-fi games. Stuff like Section Z, stuff like Terra Crusta. Like, all of these things were very interesting for a child to grow up with, but they were all ones that I still have a fondness for today because my upbringing was very different from other people that were just the adventure game kids. And so the NES has a special place in my heart for that reason alone. Next up is a Super Nintendo, and the reason I have a Super Nintendo is because I never had one as a kid. I literally was a Sega Genesis kid. I had the Sonic 2, Terminator, I played Toe Jam and Earl, Art Alive for some reason, which was the Mario Paint version for the Sega Genesis. I played those. I never had an experience with the Super Nintendo until at its end of life. I remember Christmas Day, I ended up getting a Super Nintendo, the Killer Instinct bundle.
It's everything you love about the arcade game. Cut down to size. Only on the Super NES.
So I never even played Super Mario World. So really, my Mario fondness is not there from Nintendo's first two consoles. I ended up never playing Super Mario World until just recently. The Super Nintendo is one I like to grab titles for and try out because there's so many that I never got to experience. Next up on my shelf is my Nintendo 64. Now, I don't think I have to get into the Nintendo 64. I have an entire series dedicated to the N64 score because that was the console I remember in my childhood playing with my friends, cousins. The multiplayer experience was incredible, and I am going for a complete collection on the Nintendo 64 for those reasons. So I can kind of skim over that one, but I really do have a fondness for the Nintendo 64 more than any other console. Next up on my shelf is my Xbox 360. And have I ever had an experience like an Xbox 360 ever again? I would say no. Because not only did this open up the online experience, the couch co-op was amazing. And I've always been a fan of the couch co-op experience, and I think that that's something I would love to see come back into gaming. But the Xbox 360 had so many titles that people were able to enjoy together. And the online experience was groundbreaking. I remember the Halos, the Gears of War, throwing down on that stuff in online battles was absolutely incredible, and something that I don't think I've re-experienced with any console so far. So the Xbox 360 was my go-to. I still think to this day it is the most comfortable controller ever, and I've always liked the Xbox 360's like implosion design. I think that that was their peak, unfortunately, and ever since then Xbox has done nothing but disappoint people. Next on my shelf is my Sega Genesis, and the reason I have that guy is because it was my childhood console. I had a Model 1 first, and I remember one of my first games was Street Fighter Championship Edition. I played the crap out of that game. I hated that you had to press the start button to switch between kicks and punches, but I did not let that stop me from trying to enjoy the game, and really where my love for Ken from the Street Fighter series started. Everybody was a Ryu fan. I liked the idea that the other guy, the blonde dum-dum, was not as popular, and it ended up being one that I actually enjoyed quite a bit. The Sega Genesis, man, the kind of black, the Batwing controller felt a lot more adult, or at least teenage driven than the Nintendo did. People that had Sega, it wasn't as wholesome, right? Like the games were a little bit more gritty, Comic Zone, like some of this stuff was just, it was so cool. The Sega Genesis graphics have a specific look to them for that 16-bit era. But to this day, the Genesis and that Sega portion of my life growing up was important. That was the one that I had in my bedroom. Next up is my PlayStation 1. That console, I don't actually remember how I got it. I remember that I took a trip over to Europe with my buddy who had moved over there because his dad was in the military, so I went to go visit him, and there was nothing to do at this house. Literally John Wayne movies and PlayStation 1, and of course I'm choosing a PlayStation 1 over that. And the one game that he had at his house that we played nonstop was SmackDown. And I remember loving the PlayStation 1. I remember I came back from that trip and really dove into the library. I went into all of the Marvel and Capcom fighting games, Metal Gear Solid, Spyro, The Crash, all of that stuff for 3D was just groundbreaking to me. Tekken, I couldn't get enough Tekken. So I would say, like, from game franchises, the PlayStation 1 was one where I remember early internet, playing Metal Gear Solid and going to download the strategy to beat some of those sections. As I was little, I think I was 14 at the time, early internet, I downloaded a Metal Gear Solid walkthrough guide from some obscure HTML website, and I remember printing it off. In fact, I might still have it to this day. But yeah, those were some fun memories on the PlayStation 1. I also have the original Xbox, and though I only played Halo 2, and I remember being at the GameStop in the mall during launch because we were so excited for that to come out, I didn't play a whole lot on the Xbox. I remember playing Total Overdose, which was like a crazy like Mexican gunslinger game, and to this day I still think that game's really fun. And then also a game called The Suffering, which was like a creepy horror action game, but I didn't play a whole lot on the Xbox other than that. I did put many hours though into Burnout 3, which I played a lot on the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox as well. Aside from that, I have a couple other consoles that are kind of flanking the PlayStation 2. I had Fantavision at launch. I remember playing Bouncer as some of those launch games, but really I fell in love with the God of War series, which I have talked ad nauseum about how much I love God of War. So that's why the PlayStation 2 has its fondness for me. It was the God of War and the Devil May Cries and Shadow of the Colossus. Those three titles alone were a system seller for me on the PlayStation 2. And unfortunately, I didn't have a Sega Saturn or Dreamcast, though I do now. Those did not hold as much weight because I never had them as a kid. I didn't have them as a teenager. So I didn't dive into the library until way later in life. In my retro game room, those are the consoles that I have hooked up, but the ones that I really have underneath of the main TV are the ones that I play a lot more often than not, which is kind of sad because I really like the PlayStation 1 and I should play it a little bit more. But I'm curious for you guys, in going back through your memories on gaming consoles, why do you guys have a gaming console? I know it's easy to say, well, I just love the games, but did you also have a storied past? Did you have a reason that console meant something to you? I'm curious. I'd like to know what your guys' thoughts are. So let me know in the comments below, or if you guys are a YouTuber, send me a video response or do a video response on this video about the stories that you have about some of your favorite consoles. Or what do you have directly connected to that retro TV that you like to go back to all the time? All right, guys, if you like what I got going on, you like my content, hit that subscribe button, and I will catch you on the next video.